to Designed and Delivered for Destiny. I'm your host, Nicole Cherie. I'm a wife, author, life coach, business owner, and speaker. I've been a mental health therapist for over 10 years, and now I want to bring the conversations from my office and bring it to you wherever you are. Each episode, we will discuss various topics related to your design, your deliverance, or your destiny. I'm glad you're taking time out of your busy schedule to tune in. Let's jump on in. Last episode, I introduced the importance of taking time to assess what are your voices of influence. And we began to explore the reasons you think and behave in certain ways. And this is important for many reasons, right? Like one being that often you think you're being true to yourself, but really you're being true to the voices that molded you. Now, the goal isn't to erase all your voices of influence because God knew in His providence, He allowed those voices to be in your life for a reason in that specific time and season. The question is, which voices should be leading you? And have you missed out on your divine appointment because the healthy voices keep getting blocked? Last week, I also mentioned how what you hear affects what you see. And to take it further, what you see creates the vision that you run towards. If there is no vision, well, people perish. You perish. Like you don't die, but your life won't be as fulfilling, nor will you prosper in the way that you are designed to. Remember how I said that it's not enough to just identify and get rid of healthy voices, but that voice, those voices that have been removed, well, they need to be replaced. And since God's voice is the most reliable and powerful, He is the one that we desire to be led by. Herein lies the challenge, because next to questions of identity and purpose, most people ask, how do I know the voice of God? Or how does God speak so that I'll know His voice? Is God talkative? Does He speak once and if you don't hear Him, you're out of luck? What about when He's silent? Then what? There's so many questions that we ask about the voice of God. Here's what I'll say. He's a living and active God. Not some old man sitting on the couch resting from all his hard work. So we know that His voice is just as present and powerful today as it was 2,000 years ago. We know that He's not limited in any capacity in His ability to speak to us in any way that He wants to speak to us. But where is His voice? Well, let me ask you this. When was the last time you felt certain that you were in alignment with God's will? And how did you know? Like, what were you hearing and seeing that gave you that certainty? Did someone come and tell you? Did you get a revelation while reading the Word? Was it through a song during your prayer time? How did it happen for you? If I had to guess, each of you would answer this differently. I noticed for me that in some seasons, I would just get regular downloads in my spirit and it would be very clear that God was speaking. Then in others, it would be more symbolic through a dream. Sometimes it would come through a person, and sometimes for me, it would actually come through nature. So it's interesting that it does look different in different times in our lives. And, for each of us, it could look very different. Let's just take a few minutes to look at some of the ways God uses His voice in our lives. But before I do that, I want to thank you all for your support of my podcast. And I just want to ask, if you haven't already, please take a second and like and subscribe. It will help this to grow and to reach many other people. And please share with those that you think would benefit from this content. Thank you for your support. Let's jump back in. Now, when Joshua and the Israelites received instruction for his team to walk around the wall of the city of Jericho, part of those instructions involved them having to use their voice on the seventh day for the barrier, the issue, the wall, the obstacle to fall down. I don't know about you, but don't you ever wonder why God didn't just use His own voice to make it fall? He used his voice to give them the instructions, so he could have used his voice to fix the issue. But what I found is that most times it will be your voice that he wants to use to change the situation that you're facing. In this case, with Joshua and the Israelites, shouting with music was necessary, right? Almost like they went into a state of praise. How often do you praise as you are going around in circles and facing various obstacles and not seeing the changes that you've been praying for? It seems to me that it's clear that praise is a tactic that God has given us to use to tear down walls in our lives. And there are many other ways that he uses our voice to destroy the obstacles coming up against us. But the other part to this that, we often don't talk about is the fact that they were instructed to walk around the wall once a day for 6 days. And last time I checked, there were 24 hours in a day. So what do you think they were doing with the rest of that time? Yes, they probably were resting at certain points, eating, fellowshipping. But I'm wondering what else could they have been doing? And what comes to mind is they were thinking. They had plenty of time for all kinds of thoughts to settle in and become a voice within them. That's interesting, right? What was their mindset in the midst of the waiting period? Their victory was already predetermined to take place on the 7th day as long as they followed instructions. But the waiting period is always when those voices of doubt and discord become the loudest. This is that period of time where your thoughts can begin to weaken your voice, weaken your desire to want to praise, weaken that desire within you to be fervent in your praying. It creates so much doubt that there's just no motivation to speak life over your situation. So then, has God's impact in your life been limited because you're not using your voice? Something to think about. Okay, now let's look at what happens when your destiny is connected to the voice of a person. We could list tons of people in the Bible and in real life whose destiny was directly tied to receiving instruction from a person. You have your Elijah and Elijah, your Samuel and Eli, Saul and Ananias. And in every one of these situations, God could have chosen to speak directly to those individuals the entire time. But instead, he used a person to be the voice of direction in their life. Not to say that he never spoke to them directly, because he did, but there were certain instructions he, for whatever reason, did not give, which were very important actually and necessary, but they only came through a person. We can sit and ponder for years as to why God works this way, but I'm learning that God is who he is, and that is not going to change. Have you missed your divine appointment with the person that God has sent you to give you direction? Is it possible that that person who offended you was actually someone who had something that you needed, but the offense caused you to withdraw and no longer see their value? You've completely shifted the way you treat that person, the way you interact with them. Your heart towards them has changed. It seems as if offense, impatience, and distrust are 3 of the top reasons we miss out on what God wants to give us through a person. On top of that, we now live in a society whereby you can get the answers to most of your questions through a machine just by going online. And so people now overlook the necessity of connecting to a person for direction, wisdom, and understanding. Is it possible that some of our delays are because we have not allowed ourselves to connect to people who God has chosen to carry a word for our destiny? Oh, and by the way, God isn't just going to send the person that is the most obvious. It's not always the person with the title or a certain educational background, but it could be someone who's younger than you, or someone who is less educated or has fewer titles. What he wants us to do is to look at people based on the spiritual content inside of them versus those accolades and their appearance. So is your heart open to connect to people who are much different from you, and to see how God is using his diverse creation in very unique and amazing ways? Have you taken the time to invest in people, to honor people that come into your life so that you can receive what God wants to give you through that person? Or have you been quick to move on? What we would say, keep it moving. This is what I believe God is calling us to do in this generation. And if not, we will miss his voice. So much has been written about discerning the voice of God by people far more qualified to talk about this topic. And, if God leads me, then I would definitely go in more detail on this another time. But I want to just ask and hone in on 3 questions. Do you believe that God is speaking to you today? Do you know how to recognize his voice when he is speaking? And do you actually understand what he's saying? Those are 3 very important questions to answer, like right now. I mean, literally pause if you have to, but you must know the answer to these 3 questions. If your answer to these questions are yes, yes, and yes, then great. Your next step is just ensuring that his voice is louder than the voices of your past, and it's just to be consistently obedient to what he's saying and to walk by faith. If your answer to any of these 3 questions are no, then it means there's an opportunity to deepen your understanding of the relationship God wants to have with you. And here's the part that can be so frustrating, so disconcerting, is that it's a process to have a confident yes to all 3 of those questions. Yes, I believe God is speaking to me today. Yes, I know how to recognize his voice when he's speaking. And yes, I understand what he is saying when he speaks. For me, like I mentioned before, the way that God speaks to me, it varies at different times and different seasons. And if I'm not attuned to what he's doing in the present, I'm often expecting him to speak to me the same as he did in the past. And often he's trying to grow my ability to hear from him in different ways. And so it's hard to, once I'm confident in that yes, then he stretches me even more. But once you begin to at least feel like you have a foundational understanding, your life will never be the same. To be honest though, this is where most people give up and are content with a lukewarm Christian life. Jeremiah 29:13 says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." As humans, especially as women, we can be very simple, right? Like we ask, say, of our spouses, the little things, the small things, and we're ready to give all of us to them. We give away everything about us. And not to make it seem like God is the total opposite, that he's just so hard to get to. But what I will say is there are some things about him that will require you to put your whole heart into the seeking process. And this isn't to say to go and Google everything about God, because that can be a trap that will lead you down the wrong path. It's more of a surrender first, pray for wisdom second, and follow the processes that God has ordained to lead you to him. I mean, he's already with you. There are just some things that you don't really know yet about him that once you do know, it's going to change the trajectory of your life. Now, one of the hardest aspects of going on this journey to follow the voices that were actually ordained to lead you is that you have to die to the flesh, meaning all those voices that you've been carrying that have been leading you from your past or even from the present, they have to either get canceled or submit to the healthy voices. So if God is saying, hey, go connect with those people, but the voices within you are saying, don't trust those people, don't get too close, you can potentially miss something that God has for you. If the person God sends to tell you that you're going to be on stage one day leading people to him and the voices in you are saying, me? Absolutely not. I'm not good enough. I'm not qualified to do that. I'm not like those other people who do that. Then whichever voice is louder is the one that will win. And what I've noticed, and you've probably heard this before, is that God's voice, most of the time, it's not loud or aggressive. It can be very subtle. It can easily get swallowed up by the other voices in your life to the point that you will question whether you heard it in the first place. So, what do you have to do to destroy those internal voices that have been in control? Well, for example, for some of you, it may mean to forgive that person who left you or hurt you. Perhaps to forgive yourself for making those choices. By doing that, you're allowing yourself to get down to the root of what has allowed that voice to exist. And unless you get down and dig up those roots and understand your why, what is contributing to this voice having such a stronghold on me, it's going to be like taking a shot at the basketball hoop and 6'11" Giannis Antetokounmpo standing there blocking every single one. There's no winning, no victory for you, period. And I know that sounds extreme, but I really hope you get the importance of doing this work. You got to understand that you were designed to win. Those challenges you went through with your parents, your family, or in life, that was just to shape and mold you for your destiny, never to destroy you or keep you bound. Every obstacle course, it has a beginning and an ending. And at the end, you're expected to feel victorious and stronger, not weaker, defeated, and lacking hope. The reason you felt that way and may still feel that way is because of the voices that were with you on your journey. And yes, naturally, after battling through something, you're going to feel tired, exhausted, out of breath. But imagine if you shouted and praised while going through those circumstances and then chose to do the same even after that situation ended. Imagine if during your waiting period, the voices inside of you said, "This too shall pass. This isn't happening because something is wrong with you. This is part of a bigger plan." What if the voices around you said, "It is not your fault. You are not your body. You are not those scars. You are not those wounds." All of that will be restored and all of it will be made new. I believe if those were your voices, I believe if you allow those to be your voices from here on out, you will look and feel much different coming out of whatever situations, whatever circumstances you are facing. This is why I love coaching people on their journey towards their destiny, because we need a voice to help us move the negative voices out of the way so the healthier ones can take over. And this is not some positivity, let's just ignore the bad stuff in life recommendation, not at all. Because just like the men in Jericho could see that the people inside the city could see them marching around, you can see the challenges that you're facing. Don't close your eyes, keep them wide open, but just make choices based on the right voices. So you all know that we can't possibly talk about everything in one episode, but if you have questions that you would like me to talk about in more detail, please comment and post them. Let me know in the comments if you're still learning how to hear God's voice, or you're more so working on getting rid of the other voices that are getting in the way. All right, you guys know what time it is. This is the time where we get to discuss a phrase, pattern, or belief that has been a hindrance to many in the culture, and if we eradicate it, it will improve your life, your family, and the community. It's chain breaking time. This week, it's actually a behavior pattern that I would like to mention, and that is disregarding other people's pain. It's not uncommon to look at tragedies that are happening in other people's lives, in the community, or around the world and dismiss it because it's not happening to you. To scroll through your news feed and just skip past those things that are happening on the other side of the world. It's easy to fall into this victim way of thinking that when bad things have happened to you, like no one cared, so why should you? Or to even sometimes get jealous of the attention someone else is getting when they go through pain. Please, people, let's stop comparing and taking a self-pity, woe is me view of your life. The truth is that there are many people who are grieving when you're in pain that you may never meet. There are people praying and interceding for you that look nothing like you. It's time that we care about our neighbors, those who are different from us, those who we may never meet in this life. It's time that our boundaries of love are expanded. When you can grieve and cry for those around the world who will never see your tears, you have tapped into what it really means to have the heart of Jesus. Let me close with a word of encouragement. You are hearing this for a reason. There is something that God wants to do in and through your life, but perhaps there is a voice that has been so strong that it's been blocking him from doing things the way that he wants to do it through you. I pray that you will refuse to surrender to those voices, but to take a stand by the authority of Jesus Christ that has been given unto you and come against those things. Use your voice. Value people and die to yourself so that God's voice will be the loudest. Until next week, shalom.